Hello and welcome to the BMC Quick Course Series. My name is Frank Rhodes and I'm the Db2 Solutions Architect for the administrative products based out of Austin, Texas. This is the second part on how to define a Jenkins pipeline to drive the AMI DevOps for Db2 plugin projects. You will need to have already completed the actions outlined in the Building a Pipeline Part 1 course. Here is a sample folder that we provided with the product. In the Building a Pipeline Part 1, we went in and configured the Compare and Submit Gen rollback projects. Now I'm going to select the Pipeline project and then select to configure that project. Pipeline projects can prompt for parameters in the same manner as freestyle projects. In the actual pipeline text, you will see how you can use these parameters. The first few lines of the pipeline are to allow for communications between the pipeline and the plugins being driven. The import line at the top is to allow for communications. The bmc.reset defines particular variables to the pipeline, and the bmc.get pulls the values of these variables so that they're available for review in the pipeline. These three commands will need to be allowed via the Jenkins in-process script approval. We will look at this more when we first try to run the pipeline. I've also defined a few variables that we will use during the running of the pipeline. Here is the first stage of the pipeline. We're calling the Compare project. We are able to pass in values for the build parameters of the Compare project. Please note that to pass in pipeline parameters to the project being called, you need to use the params dot and the variable name versus just using the variable name within the squiggly brackets and the preceding $sign. Also, the workspace variable referenced here is a built-in environment variable that we're going to be using for the output directory. Based upon values returned from the plugin module, the skip stage variable will be set here. As an example, we're showing how an email could be sent with the results of the comparison that was performed. In order to send an email, you do need to have Jenkins configured appropriately. The email will send all files in the pipeline workspace directory beginning with the job ID that was provided when the build was performed and ending with the .txt suffix. We also provide examples of how you could launch the workbench for Db2 via a hyperlink embedded in the email. Here in the second stage, we will either prompt for approval or we will give a message that the stage was skipped due to no differences being found in the compare. As a way to prompt for approval, this example pipeline is using the pipeline input command. The last stage of the pipeline will either call the submit gen rollback project or it's simply going to give a message that the stage is being skipped. So now that we have the pipeline defined, we need to go ahead and run it by performing a build. The first build fails, so I select the number 1 with the red circle next to it there on the left side of the screen. This will give me details of this particular build. Now I go ahead and I select the console output to see what messages were generated in regards to the build. In the console log, it shows that the import on the first line of the pipeline script failed. I can click the link there in the console log to approve this, or I can go to Manage Jenkins and do the approval from there. I approve the communications between the plugin storage and the Jenkins pipeline. After I click the Approve button, you can see that the import line is now listed as approved signatures. I run the pipeline a second time, and again it fails. I need to give yet another approval. I go to the Signatures Approval dialog, and I approve the use of the BMC reset command, and I then go back to the pipeline. It's now time to try our third build. This will be the last failure and the last approval that will be needed. I approve the use of bmc.get, and now we get to go run the pipeline for real this time. One thing to note is these signatures only have to be approved once. After all three of these have been approved, all subsequent runs of the pipeline for you or other individuals will not require any approvals. I specify the parameters and I hit the build key. The pipeline calls the compare project and it then requests approval. Remember, the stage that called the compare project also sent out an email if differences were found. Here is the email. It has 4 different attachments: the CDL file, the work list, the JCL that will run the work list, and an impact report that summarizes the contents of the work list. There are also some hyperlinks into Workbench that will launch in context against the CDL file that was generated, and to Jenkins to allow the email recipient to give approval for the pipeline to continue. So if I were to click the link to take me back into Jenkins, I can go ahead and specify approval for the changes to be implemented. This will allow the last stage of the pipeline to run. This is the stage that calls the Submit Gen Rollback project. Now the schema in Db2 looks just like the DDL I used for the comparison. Just to show this, I'm going to go ahead and perform another compare with the same DDL file that I used in build 4. You can see that this build ran much faster. That's because no differences were found. I will go ahead and click the link for build 5 to see some additional output. I will now click the console log so we can see any messages generated. Here in the console log, we're able to see that no differences were found when we performed the compare. So the actions in the approval and submit stages were skipped. Thank you for watching the course. For any more information on any of the BMC mainframe products, please visit the URL shown here.